The Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty main street of Copper Ridge, casting long shadows that seemed to writhe like serpents across the weathered wooden planks. It was the kind of heat that made men's tempers flare and their trigger fingers itch, the kind that turned civilized folks into something altogether more primitive. Elena Vasquez adjusted her black leather gloves as she stepped out of the saloon, her spurs jingling a deadly melody against the boardwalk. At 28, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had never lost a gunfight, because she hadn't. Her dark hair was pulled back severely, revealing a face that might have been beautiful if not for the cold calculation that lived behind her obsidian eyes. "Sister," came a voice from the shadows between buildings. Carmen Vasquez emerged like smoke-given form, her movements fluid and predatory. 2 years younger than Elena, she possessed the same lethal grace but with a wildness that made even hardened outlaws nervous. Where Elena was ice, Carmen was fire, both equally dangerous, both equally unforgiving. "The Hartwell Ranch," Elena said without preamble, her voice carrying the slight accent of their Mexican heritage. "Old man's been asking questions about the silver mine." Carmen's lips curved into a smile that held no warmth. "Questions can be inconvenient." The sisters had built their reputation over 5 blood-soaked years, carving out a territory that stretched from the Sonoran Desert to the Colorado River. They weren't just outlaws, they were architects of fear, engineers of chaos who had turned the lawless frontier into their personal kingdom. "He's got family," Elena continued, pulling a telegram from her vest pocket. "Wife, 2 children. The boy's barely 16. "Collateral," Carmen said with a shrug that suggested human life meant less to her than the dust beneath her boots. But Elena held up a hand. Despite her reputation, she maintained certain principles. Women and children were off-limits, a code she'd inherited from their father before the Apaches had taken him. It was perhaps the only thing that separated the Vasquez sisters from the animals they hunted. "We do this clean," Elena said. "The old man only." A commotion erupted from the far end of the street. 3 riders approached at a gallop, their horses lathered with sweat and foam. The lead rider, a man Elena recognized as Deputy Marshal Tom Brennan, pulled up hard in front of the sheriff's office, dust billowing around his mount's hooves. "Sheriff Morrison," Brennan shouted, his voice cracking with urgency. "The Hartwell place, they got him." Elena and Carmen exchanged glances. Someone had beaten them to their target. Sheriff Morrison, a grizzled veteran of too many frontier wars, emerged from his office with the weary expression of a man who'd seen every variety of human evil. "Slow down, Tom. What happened?" "Riders came in the night," Brennan gasped, still catching his breath. "Took old Hartwell right from his front porch. Left a note." The deputy handed over a piece of paper that looked like it had been torn from a wanted poster. Morrison's face darkened as he read. "What's it say?" called out Jake Murphy, the town's blacksmith, who had emerged from his shop along with a growing crowd of curious onlookers. Morrison's voice carried across the street like a death knell. "Says they want 5,000 in gold for Hartwell's life. Says to bring it to Devil's Canyon at sunset, or they'll send him back in pieces." Elena felt Carmen tense beside her. 5,000 was more money than most folks in Copper Ridge would see in a lifetime. It was also exactly the amount that had gone missing from the Tucson bank 3 weeks ago. Money that belonged to the Vasquez sisters. "Who signed it?" Elena called out, stepping forward. Morrison looked up, his eyes narrowing as he recognized the sisters. The entire street seemed to hold its breath. Everyone knew who the Vasquez sisters were, and everyone knew that when they took an interest in something, blood usually followed. "No signature," Morrison replied carefully. "But there's a mark. Looks like a scorpion." Carmen's hand dropped to her gun. The Scorpion Gang, a group of Mexican revolutionaries turned bandits who had been encroaching on Vasquez territory for months. Elena had warned their leader, a man called Ala Scorpion, to stay south of the border. Apparently he hadn't listened. "Sheriff," Elena said, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed, "we'll be taking this matter under advisement." Morrison's jaw tightened. "This is a law enforcement matter, Miss Vasquez." Elena's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "In case you've forgotten, Sheriff, There is no law west of Copper Ridge except what my sister and I allow. The Scorpion Gang has made this personal. She turned to address the crowd that had gathered. Anyone who helps the law with this matter will answer to us. Anyone who interferes with our business will join Hartwell in whatever hole they've put him in. The crowd began to disperse quickly, heads down, avoiding eye contact. They'd learned long ago that neutrality was the only safe position when the Vasquez sisters were involved. As Elena and Carmen walked back toward their horses, Carmen spoke in rapid Spanish. ¿Por qué nos importa un viejo granjero? Because, Elena replied in English, ensuring anyone listening would understand, no one takes what's ours. Not our territory, not our money, and certainly not our reputation. She swung up into her saddle, a magnificent black stallion that seemed to share her predatory nature. Besides, sister, when was the last time we had a good hunt? Carmen's laughter was like breaking glass as she mounted her own horse, a blood bay mare with eyes like burning coals. Too long, Hermana. Far too long. As the sisters rode out of Copper Ridge, heading toward the Badlands where Devil's Canyon carved a wound in the earth, the townspeople watched from behind curtains and cracked doors. They knew that by sunset someone would be dead. The only question was who. Behind them, Sheriff Morrison crumpled the ransom note in his fist, his face grim. He'd been a lawman for 20 years, but he'd never felt as helpless as he did watching the Vasquez sisters ride toward what could only be a bloodbath. In the distance, thunder rumbled across the desert sky, though there wasn't a cloud to be seen. Some said it was the sound of approaching rain. Others, who knew the sisters better, said it was the sound of approaching death. The ride to Devil's Canyon took Elena and Carmen through some of the most unforgiving terrain in Arizona territory. Red rock formations jutted from the earth like the bones of ancient giants, and the sparse vegetation seemed to claw at the sky in desperate supplication. The sisters rode in comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts about the confrontation ahead. Elena's mind worked like a chess master's, calculating moves and countermoves. The Scorpion Gang had made a critical error by operating in Vasquez territory without permission, but taking their stolen gold was an act of war. Ella Scorpion was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Elena suspected the latter. How many men does he have? Carmen asked, breaking the silence as they crested a ridge that offered a view of the canyon below. Last intelligence said 12, Elena replied, pulling out a brass spyglass. But that was 2 months ago. Could be more now. Through the lens, she could see the canyon's entrance, a narrow gap between towering walls of sandstone that opened into a natural amphitheater. It was a perfect place for an ambush, which was undoubtedly why Ella Scorpion had chosen it. What he hadn't counted on was that the Vasquez sisters knew every inch of this territory, including the hidden paths that led down into the canyon from above. There, Carmen pointed to a thin trail of smoke rising from deep within the canyon. They're confident. Overconfident, Elena corrected. She collapsed the spyglass and tucked it away. We go in quiet. I want to see what we're dealing with before we make our presence known. They dismounted and led their horses down a treacherous goat path that Elena had discovered years ago during a pursuit. The path wound around the canyon's rim before descending through a series of natural ledges that provided excellent cover. By the time they reached a position where they could observe the Scorpion Gang's camp, the sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon. The camp was larger than Elena had expected. She counted at least 15 men, all armed with rifles and revolvers. They had set up in the center of the canyon floor, with their horses picketed near a small spring that bubbled up from the rocks. And there, tied to a wooden post near the largest tent, was Thomas Hartwell. The old rancher looked worse for wear. His clothes were torn, his face bore the marks of rough treatment, and he slumped against his bonds as if barely conscious. But he was alive, which was more than Elena had expected from the Scorpion Gang's usual methods. Ella Scorpion, Carmen whispered, nodding toward a tall man in an elaborate sombrero who was gesticulating wildly as he spoke to his men. Elena studied their target through the spyglass. Joaquin Morales, known as Ella Scorpion, was a former captain in the Mexican army who had turned to banditry after a court-martial for excessive brutality. He was a man who enjoyed inflicting pain, which made him dangerous in an unpredictable way. "He's telling them about the gold," Elena murmured, reading the man's lips. "Says it will make them all rich men." "Our gold?" Carmen growled. "Indeed." Elena checked her pocket watch. "Sunset is in 2 hours. Morrison and his deputies will be here soon with whatever gold they could scrape together from the town. Do we let them walk into the trap?" Elena considered this. Sheriff Morrison was an honest man trying to do an impossible job in an impossible place. She had no particular fondness for him, but she respected his integrity. More importantly, she needed him alive to maintain the delicate balance that kept Copper Ridge from descending into complete chaos. "No," she decided. "We intercept them before they reach the canyon. This is our fight now." They made their way back up the treacherous path, leading their horses with practiced ease. Once they reached the rim, Elena pulled out a small mirror and began flashing signals toward the main trail that led to Devil's Canyon. It was an old Apache trick their father had taught them, using reflected sunlight to communicate across vast distances. 20 minutes later, they heard the sound of approaching horses. Sheriff Morrison appeared first, followed by Deputy Brennan and 2 other men Elena didn't recognize. They were leading a pack horse that presumably carried whatever gold the town had been able to gather. "Sheriff," Elena called out as she and Carmen rode down to intercept them. Morrison reined in his horse, his hand instinctively moving toward his gun before he caught himself. "Miss Vasquez, I thought I made it clear this was a law enforcement matter. And I thought I made it clear that there is no law here except what we allow," Elena replied smoothly. "How much gold did you bring? That's none of your concern." Carmen's horse danced sideways, bringing her closer to the pack animal. 2,000, maybe 2,500, she said after a quick assessment. "Not nearly enough." "It's all the town could raise," Brennan said defensively. Elena nodded thoughtfully. "Ella Scorpion is expecting 5,000. When you show up with half that amount, he'll kill Hartwell and probably you as well. Then he'll ride into Copper Ridge and take what he wants anyway." Morrison's face was grim. "What do you suggest?" "You turn around and go home," Elena said. "Leave this to professionals." "And Hartwell?" "Will be returned to his family unharmed," Carmen said. "You have our word." Morrison studied the sisters for a long moment. He'd been dealing with them for 3 years, and while they were undoubtedly dangerous criminals, they had never broken their word to him. Their code, twisted as it might be, was more reliable than most legal contracts in the territory. "What's your price?" he asked finally. Elena's smile was predatory. "The Scorpion Gang has something that belongs to us. We're simply going to collect it with interest." The sun hung like a blood-orange medallion above the canyon rim as Elena and Carmen made their final preparations. They had sent Sheriff Morrison and his men back to Copper Ridge with strict instructions to wait for word before taking any action. Now, as twilight painted the desert in shades of crimson and gold, the sisters prepared to reclaim what was theirs. "Remember," Elena said as she checked her weapons one final time, "we need Ella Scorpion alive long enough to tell us where he's hidden our gold." Carmen nodded, though her eyes held the wild gleam that always appeared before violence. She had strapped on her twin Colt .45s and carried a Winchester rifle across her back. Elena preferred a single gun, a custom Remington that had never failed her, and a knife that had belonged to their father. They descended into the canyon using the hidden path, moving like ghosts through the gathering darkness. The Scorpion Gang's campfire cast dancing shadows on the canyon walls, and the sound of rough laughter echoed off the stone. Elena counted the men again, 16 now, with one more having arrived while they were dealing with Morrison. "Too many for a frontal assault," Carmen whispered. "Which is why we're not making one," Elena replied. She pointed to a series of ledges that ran along the canyon's eastern wall. "You take position there. When I give the signal, start picking them off from the high ground." "What's the signal?" Elena's smile was sharp in the moonlight. "You'll know it when you see it." Carmen melted into the shadows, moving with the fluid grace of a hunting cat. Elena waited until her sister was in position before beginning her own approach to the camp. She moved from boulder to boulder, using the natural cover to get within 50 yards of the fire. Ella Scorpion was holding court near the flames, regaling his men with tales of their future wealth. He had opened a bottle of tequila and was passing it around, clearly confident that the evening would go according to his plan. When the sheriff arrives with the gold, he was saying in Spanish, we kill them all and take it. Then we ride to Copper Ridge and take whatever else we want. The Vasquez sisters think they own this territory, but they are just women playing at being bandits. Several of his men laughed and raised the bottle in a toast. Elena's jaw tightened. She had heard such dismissive words before, usually from men who were now feeding the desert vultures. She checked her pocket watch. Sunset had come and gone, and there was no sign of Morrison, exactly as planned. Ella Scorpion was beginning to look agitated, pacing back and forth near the fire. Where are they? He demanded. The message said sunset. Maybe they decided the old man wasn't worth 5,000 in gold, suggested one of his lieutenants, a scarred man with gold teeth. Then we kill him and ride to town, Ella Scorpion snarled. He drew his gun and stalked toward where Hartwell was tied. I'll send his head to the sheriff as a message. Elena rose from behind her boulder like an avenging angel, her Remington already in her hand. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Joaquin. The entire camp froze. 16 pairs of eyes turned toward her, and she could see the recognition dawning on their faces. The legendary Elena Vasquez, standing alone in their midst with nothing but a single gun and absolute confidence. Impossible, Ella Scorpion breathed. How did you get past your sentries? Elena's voice carried clearly across the camp. What sentries? As if summoned by her words, Carmen's rifle cracked from the canyon rim. One of Ella Scorpion's men spun and fell, clutching his shoulder. Then another shot and another man went down. I believe, Elena said conversationally as chaos erupted around her, you have something that belongs to me. The signal had been given. The hunt had begun. The canyon erupted into chaos as Carmen's rifle continued its deadly song from above. Elena moved like liquid mercury through the camp, her Remington barking death with each precise shot. The Scorpion gang, caught completely off guard, scrambled for cover behind rocks and supply crates. Kill her. Ella Scorpion screamed, but his men were too busy trying to survive Carmen's relentless fire from the rim to mount an effective counterattack. Elena rolled behind a wagon as bullets whined overhead, splinters of wood exploding around her. She counted shots. Carmen had taken down 4 men, and Elena had dropped 3 more. That left 9 plus Ella Scorpion himself. Joaquin. Elena called out, her voice cutting through the gunfire. Your men are dying for your stupidity. Surrender now and I might let some of them live. Never, came the reply, followed by a wild spray of bullets that went nowhere near their target. Elena smiled grimly. Fear made men careless and careless men made mistakes. She spotted movement near the horses and put a bullet through a bandit's leg as he tried to reach his rifle. The man's scream echoed off the canyon walls. From her position above, Carmen had shifted to a new vantage point, keeping the remaining bandits pinned down. Her shots were surgical in their precision. She could have killed them all by now, but Elena needed information about their stolen gold. Your sister cannot protect you forever, Ella Scorpion shouted. Eventually you will run out of bullets. Will I? Elena replied, ejecting the spent shells from her Remington and reloading with practiced efficiency. Carmen, how many do you count? 6 left standing, came the reply from above. Plus our friend with the big mouth. Elena spotted Thomas Hartwell, still tied to his post but now conscious and alert. The old rancher's eyes met hers and she nodded slightly. He understood. When the moment came he needed to be ready to move. A bandit broke cover, running toward the canyon entrance. Carmen's rifle spoke once and the man tumbled into the dust. 5 left. This is your last chance, Joaquin, Elena called out. Tell me where you've hidden my gold and I'll make your death quick. Your gold? Ella Scorpion's laughter was tinged with hysteria. It's already gone. Sent south to buy guns for the revolution. You'll never see it again. Elena's blood ran cold. If the gold was truly gone, then this entire operation had been for nothing. But something in Ella Scorpion's voice suggested he was lying. a desperate bluff to save his worthless life. She made her decision. Rising from cover, Elena sprinted toward the center of camp, her gun blazing. 2 bandits fell before they could react. A third managed to get off a shot that tugged at her sleeve before Carmen's rifle silenced him forever. Scorpion emerged from behind a boulder, his own gun trained on Elena. For a moment they faced each other across the firelit camp like gunslingers in some dime novel, except this was real and only one of them would walk away. "You should have stayed in Mexico," Elena said quietly. "You should have minded your own business," he replied. They fired simultaneously. Scorpion's shot went wide, thrown off by the tremor of fear in his hand. Elena's bullet found its mark, punching through his chest and spinning him around. He collapsed beside the fire, his elaborate sombrero rolling away into the darkness. The canyon fell silent except for the crackle of flames and the groans of wounded men. Elena walked over to where Scorpion lay dying, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "The gold," she said simply. He smiled through bloody teeth. "Hidden, in the old mine, north of Tucson. But you'll never find it, without the map." "What map?" His hand moved weakly toward his vest pocket. Elena knelt and retrieved a folded piece of paper, stained with blood but still readable. It showed the location of an abandoned silver mine with detailed directions to a hidden cache. "Gracias," Elena said softly, and Scorpion's eyes went dark. Carmen descended from the rim as Elena cut Hartwell's bonds. The old rancher was shaky but unharmed, his eyes wide with a mixture of gratitude and terror. "Can you ride?" Elena asked. Hartwell nodded. I don't know how to thank you." "Don't," Carmen said, appearing beside them like a shadow. "We didn't do this for you." Elena helped the rancher to his feet and pointed toward the canyon entrance. "There's a horse tied at the mouth of the canyon. Ride straight to Copper Ridge and don't look back." As Hartwell stumbled away into the night, Carmen examined the map by firelight. "Think it's real?" "Only one way to find out," Elena replied, holstering her gun. "But first we have a message to send." She looked around at the carnage they had wrought, bodies scattered across the canyon floor. The Scorpion Gang's reign of terror ended in a single brutal engagement. Word would spread quickly through the territory. The Vasquez sisters had spoken, and their word was law. "Come, Hermana," Elena said, walking toward their horses. "We have gold to collect." As they rode out of Devil's Canyon under a blood-red moon, the sisters left behind more than just bodies. They left a legend that would be whispered around campfires for generations. The night 2 women reminded the Arizona territory who truly ruled the lawless frontier. Behind them, the fire burned low, casting dancing shadows on the canyon walls like the ghosts of the men who had dared to challenge the Vasquez sisters and paid the ultimate price.